I want to share with you all a personal journey that led me to believe that there are actually synergies between compassion and business. Let me start by sharing with you a story. Early this year, I had an opportunity to visit Mongot. This is a large Tibetan refugee settlement in South India. My family and I lived in that as a refugee in the settlement for about 10 years. Mongot hosts about 8,000 monks and nuns. When I visited Mongot, I had the great fortune to witness a great elderly Tibetan meditation master who was in his mid-80s in practicing a meditation that is done at the time of death called Thudam, or clear light. And I know Lizard is familiar with Thudam, but curious, how many of you have heard of Thudam or clear light meditation? I see a couple of hands. Yep. So in this practice of meditation, it's what the meditator does is that he abides in the state of clear light, or the most subtle level of one's consciousness. And if I had to use an analogy, if you use the analogy of water, like your mind, it's like the fundamental nature of water is pure and clean and transparent. Similarly, the fundamental nature of all our mind is this purity of mind, free of what we call afflictive emotions like attachment, hatred, jealousy, those kind of things. So the reason why the monks abide by that state is that in the belief is that in the next life, one will have less afflictive emotions. So in order to, somebody in this state of meditation, because the body does not smell, and also rigor mortis doesn't set in. When I arrived there, the monk was physically dead. He was there was no heartbeat, nothing, for 8 days, and he eventually stayed like this for 13 days. There were a few Tibetans who were trained by Western scientists who were doing research, and the data was being analyzed here in the West. In order to do this practice, one has to be able to generate tremendous amount of compassion and meditative stability through one's practice. So here's another photo which I had a chance to take. And the elderly monk had known my father, so I had an opportunity to spend about 90 minutes there. Tibetan monks, again, many of you may be familiar that Western neuroscientists have been doing research on them, and it has been shown that they've been able to generate the highest level of activity in the left prefrontal cortex, which is most associated with positive emotions and compassion. So during my discussion and conversation with the monks more about this practice, I asked them what is the biggest obstacle that they face. And this is a discussion photo. And they said it's financial. Apparently, when one does this meditation practice, you need other monks who needs to chant, and the meditator or the supporters of the meditator, it's very expensive for them to finance, to pay for it, and for the living expenses. And so sometimes the students or the supporters have to actually request the meditator to come out of the state of Thudam and leave the body. Well, the reason why I wanted to share this story is to impress upon you that even in the monasteries, that the importance of finance, and just as we in the West, we're looking to get more mental balance and happiness. In our community, we're looking to develop more material balance. In the past, we used to look for patrons and sponsors to fund support our monasteries, our community. But now, more and more in our community, we're looking at business as the most sustainable means. So from here, I just wanted to share again the importance of both on compassion and business. Yep. Now let me share a little bit about my background. I was born in a refugee settlement, as Christine mentioned, in India. And this is a picture of me, 4 years old. Here's another photo of me with my two sisters in front of a house. The log on top is to prevent the wind from blowing our house, at the roof of a house. My sisters and I, we did our initial schooling at a Christian missionary school in North India in a place called Kalimpong. The school was founded initially for Anglo-Indian children, orphans, Anglo-Indian children, but later it opened its door to Tibetan refugees. We all had a sponsor. I was fortunate to have a German sponsor who paid for my education, which was about $40 a month for room, board, and education. Despite the meager resources, the teachers and staff tried the best to provide and give us the best education. However, during this period of my life, the most memorable, vivid memory I have is going hungry. We used to go up into the hillside to collect berries to supplement our food. And I used to look at the cows and think they're so lucky because they can graze grass wherever they want. But I've never tasted food as good as back then. Food used to taste really good, and it tastes particularly good when you're really hungry. And I want to share this because it's even today when I think of those times, my food tastes better. And there's a direct relationship between mind and matter, between happiness and suffering, and the reality that understanding that things are not independent, but interdependent, and things are relative. And that understanding does help you have a deep understanding and ability to generate compassion. So in the mid-1980s, our school, there was a lot of civil strife. Many people were killed in a conflict in that area. And my parents moved me to a Tibetan refugee school called Tibetan Children's Village, and that's in Dharamsala. It's in North India. There, Tibetan Children's Village, or TCV, the school is affiliated with SOS Children's Village, which many of you may be familiar with. It was founded by an Austrian World War II veteran who was impacted, who saw the horrors of World War II, especially on children. So it was at this school where I learned about compassion and compassion-generating techniques. The motto of our school was others before self. Compassion was explained to us as the emotion that one generates when one wants to alleviate the suffering of others. So it's accepted within our community that compassion is something that one can learn, and we were told about great teachers like Milarepa, who were able to totally transform their lives and gives us so much hope in the world. Because Milarepa was someone who was full of revenge and hurt a lot of people. He was able to accomplish his revenge thoughts, but then only it was through compassion that he was able to free his mind. And jokes were also shared with us to impress lessons. One such joke, which I'd like to share with you after lunch, maybe just to lighten things up, was about a monk who had to choose three things. One was to kill a goat. The second was to have sex with a woman. And the third was to drink alcohol. So the monk thought to himself, he said, okay, to kill a goat, I mean, monks are supposed to be nonviolent. It's breaking a big vow. But to have sex, I mean, you're breaking a vow of celibacy, and that's also a big no-no. So to drink alcohol, he felt, okay, it's bad, but it's not that bad. So he drank, got drunk, killed a goat, and also had sex with a woman. Now, the moral of the story is that if a mind is full of destructive emotions like attachment, hatred, jealousy, and pride, we lose total control over our mind. And in order to reduce the negative, destructive emotions, the way we do that is develop the antidotal positive emotions. And compassion is supposed to be a very powerful antidote to reduce one's destructive emotions. So once you're able to generate compassion, our minds will naturally become calmer, and we have more control over our mind. So in my final year of school, I was told that I was selected among the 1,000 Tibetan refugees to immigrate to the United States. This is just landed. So I was excited. I still remember my aunt who came to pick me up with two of her friends, how smooth the car ride was. I thought I was literally flying. And the other thing I remember was how bright the street lights were. Actually, as a matter of fact, a few of the Tibetans who were granted asylum are currently working at Eilin's company and speak very highly of Eilin too. But so my first job was washing dishes at a local restaurant. I was making $5 an hour. I converted that into Indian rupees, and I felt very rich. I saved some money. I sent some money home because I knew my family would appreciate it. And it's so true that the joy of giving is the same as joy of getting. And it was an empowering experience to be able to give. And around that time, I met a fellow dishwasher who told me about the US Army Reserve programs and the ability to finance my education and see more of America. So I took my entrance exams to go to college. This was something that I wanted to do. And after I sent in my college applications, I enlisted in the US military. So that's, so almost 4 or 5 months. So coming to America was a culture shock. Joining the military, I mean, I felt like I was in a movie. So during my training, I heard that I got accepted at Dickinson College. It's a good liberal arts college in central Pennsylvania. At Dickinson, I learned the importance of integrating different. I'm a double major in East Asia Studies and religion, and also completed a pre-medical curriculum. I was also able to develop my leadership skills. I was involved in the initial founding of a students' human rights organization called Students for a Free Tibet. Later served as one of 3 founding board of directors. The organization has now over 600 chapters around the world. So thanks. But one of the most important lessons I learned at college was reading about the US founding fathers and about modern economics. These individuals were able to exploit or tap into human self-interest for the greater good. They were not driven by power or money, but they were driven to create a more enlightened society. So here I began to appreciate the possibility that one can be motivated by self-interest and compassion, and to get the best of both worlds. And these political philosophers in the West were able to use checks and balances to mitigate the risk. So after college, I worked at a bank for 3 years and felt that I wanted to get a career in finance. I got an MBA from Thunderbird Global School of Management in Arizona as a very strong international business program. I made my money right away I met my wife there, somewhere here. So after that, I worked in a number of financial organizations, and for the last 8 years, I've been working at Mitsubishi in the investment banking group. My main job is involved in monitoring the bank's multi-billion-dollar energy and infrastructure projects. My work has allowed me to go on due diligence trips to the largest solar farms, wind projects, LNG projects, pipelines, and I've seen how technology, capital, and business has been able to transform the lives of millions of people. From our community, having said that, I believe that business, if it's only driven by profit metrics, can do a lot of harm. History has shown that. Slavery, sweatshops, and these are highly profitable ventures, but has done great harm to society. Similarly, millions of people around the world, especially indigenous people in Africa, Latin America, have been killed in order to extract their natural resources. So and despite all the extraction of so much of natural resources, out of the 7 billion people in the world, 1.2 billion still live in extreme poverty, which is less than $1.2. So and also the rich are not necessarily happier. I mean, science has shown, many scientists have shown that it's more ability to manage one's emotion than the amount of money in a bank account that matters when it comes to happiness. So on the other side, compassion, Tibetan community I've shared in the earlier, it's just compassion. Having great compassionate leaders is not enough. So it's wonderful to see now more and more business, like I work for, in our firm, there's efforts to integrate compassion and business. This is done through matching grants in order to encourage. We have our own CSR and corporate foundations, bank foundations, but they do have a very robust matching grant program to encourage employees to give. We have the Genes on Fridays. Our executives openly speak of their philanthropic activities. Recently, I've been able to develop a relationship between our bank and SOS Children's Village, and our bank has funded a program in Brazil and are looking to fund other programs. Few of my colleagues, we're working to bring mindfulness into our bank. We got a lot of good responses from other departments. And through this, I hope that we can share and learn compassion-generating techniques for oneself, one's colleagues, competitors even. And I believe this will, and again, there's data that shows that this is good to improve retention, innovation, productivity, and de-stress employees. Also, there's more and more business leaders like Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner. These are presentations I've watched on Wisdom 2.0. You can clearly see that they do integrate compassion in business. And here, I had the opportunity to have lunch with Lisa and Jonathan, and you can see how they also integrate compassion in business. And of course, obviously, Eileen Fisher, who does an amazing work. So but having said that, in the mainstream business world, I believe still many would view compassion as a sign of weakness. And so in order to really make a huge impact in the business culture, I believe it's important to teach compassion in business schools. In 2005, I had an opportunity to work with one of our trustees, who's a very dear friend. She was the former US ambassador to Finland, Barbara Barrett, to invite His Holiness the Dalai Lama to speak at our school. It had a profound impact on the students and the faculties. And one of our business school's former presidents was involved in developing, who was influenced by many, but in particular by His Holiness, in developing the MBA Oath of Honor, which is similar to what the Hippocratic Oath, which is done by physicians. And other business schools have followed that lead and have developed similar type of oaths. So I believe with this trend, there is, I believe at the end, if poverty is a disease, business is the best medicine. And just as you want a doctor to be compassionate, I believe if business people are compassionate, we'll then have, with the integration of the two, we'll have more sustainable development. So this, finally, this altruistic motivation that my teachers and elders taught us has allowed me to work very hard and still not feel very stressed. And because I know that at the end, a small helping hand can go a long way because I'm a product of it. Thank you. Okay, if anyone has questions, be happy to answer.
Yeah, I was curious about the meditation that you were explaining at the very beginning, what that was and exactly what was going on there.
Sure, okay, yeah. So it's this particular, and you can dig in a little bit more. It's more in the tantric teachings, especially in there's a teachings, if you want a little bit more detail, it's called the Guhya Samaja Tantra. Yeah, and this particular is spelled Guhys, Guhya Samaja. If you just type in similar type of words, you'll find. But it's in this practice, I haven't done this practice myself. Yeah, and it's done at the time of death. And death in Tibetan, just as a thing, it's explained as when it just because your heart stopped beating, and it doesn't mean you're dead on your pulse. Death is defined when the mind and the body actually separate. That's when you think. But when you're dying, it's believed like just how when you sleep, you slowly lose your senses. You don't, even if people talk around you, you don't hear them. Similarly, at the time of death, if you go through a natural death process, it's believed that your body becomes more and more subtle. Similarly, your mind becomes more and more subtle. So at the time of death, at the natural death, your mind becomes very, very subtle, and there's a state of physical state called the lung or the wind aspect, and the most subtle level of consciousness, which is called the state of clear light. And at the time that it's like that subtle state of wind and that thing. And normally, what happens for a normal person, if you don't do a meditation practice, is you're not able to recognize that process, and your body, your consciousness becomes subtle and just leaves your body and enters into the next thing. Here, in this case, the meditator is able to actually, when you come to that most subtle level of consciousness, which is this, as I mentioned, it's this pure state of mind which if another analogy is to if you have a nice clean clothes, the dirt is the afflictive emotions. So all these destructive emotions that we have, like hatred, jealousy, pride, that disturbs our mind, that's not actually a part of your mind. That is actually just like the dirt in your clothes. So but at this subtle state of consciousness, meditators are actually seasoned meditation practice. They're able to abide by that state of consciousness for a long period of time. And they're purposely able to stay in that state for a long period of time. And if they stay in that state for a long period of time, the belief is that in their next life, when their consciousness enters the next being and then becomes more gross, they're able to they expedite their spiritual practice. Yep. But you can go into there's specific text that explains this even in more detail. Yeah. Yes. Anyone has a mic?
I loved your analogy of feeling that you had gone into a movie when you came from a village and then came to the U.S. and then went into the military. Probably was like landing in Rambo. So now this age that we're living in, when we're surrounded by technology, it almost is like we're all entering into like a space odyssey, kind of a sci-fi. And in that context, I was curious if there is anything that you feel technology will help in the pursuit of educating and proliferating a ethos of compassion.
Yeah. The thing about technology is that if you look at Tibet's history, Buddhism, which came from India to Tibet, transformed the whole region. But if you look through the history, how it did, the challenges of the great teachers who went to India and studied. It was hot. Tibet, as you know, is up in the mountains. Many died trying to get the teachings from India, and lives were lost. But now, with technology, is like you go into YouTube, you can get the best talks and best teachings from all over the world. And I think that if you are in the right direction, if you have a good guidance, I believe like you have access to so much knowledge and wisdom, and that should really expedite one's learning and whatever knowledge you want. On the flip side, if you want to be an extremist or a terrorist and you want to learn how to make bombs, there's a danger of technology that it could create like two groups of extremities. Yeah, and I think it's a double-edged sword. Yep. So all the more reason, especially before people become hardened, and I feel fortunate, and one of the reasons why I made an effort to try to develop a relationship between our bank and SOS Children's Village is that the organization does not have any ideology. It does not try to. It's really humanitarian and focuses on poverty alleviation, because I could be shaped into anything, and I just feel fortunate that our community and our leaders happen to be very caring and compassionate people. But if we had leaders who were not caring and compassionate, who wanted to create suicide bombers, they could have easily churned out people whoever they wanted to. So, and I believe like technology can kind of do both too. So just want to share that thought.